It does make a lot of sense to grab a WWE superstar as soon as they've left that company. More often than not, they're going to have a tremendous amount of exposure, and that exposure should then help get more eyes on your own product. It's a very smart way to do business. That doesn't mean it's not incredibly obvious what's going on. If I got fired from WWE tomorrow and turned up in TNA the day after that, it's clear to all what the situation is. The problem, however, is sometimes this can actually be an issue because of how perception works. The big fish in the pond has cast you aside, but the smaller fishes are happy to lap you up, which instantly underlines the fact that you are not the big fish. We all want to be the big fish. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 WWE rejects immediately pushed by TNA. Number 10, Mr. Kennedy. When Mr. Kennedy made his debut for TNA at Genesis in January 2010, the company was going through some changes. With Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff in charge, the rule was pretty simple. If you ever had some kind of name value, they would bring you in to see what you could do. To say it undermined TNA as the number 2 promotion was an understatement. Not only was it a shame for the talent that put all the work in to keep the place afloat to begin with, when Kennedy appeared as a mystery opponent to replace an injured Bobby Lashley, he was pushed way too hard. Hogan made out like Ric Flair was about to walk through the door, and while Ken certainly did have some stock, it ultimately affected his arrival. 3 years earlier he'd been kicking ass in the WWE, but since then he had fallen from the limelight a touch, and pretending that wasn't true was silly. What's worse, rather than try and build him back to this level, TNA booked him into oblivion in a few weeks with a lot of crazy ideas. And that was that. Number 9, Bobby Lashley. As Bobby Lashley is showing right now, he's a damn good pro wrestler. Fortunately for the man himself, he was rushed to WWE's main card way too soon, which exposed him in a way that wasn't fitting of his talent. A bit more time to develop would have served him no end. Even then he still had his moments with the company, the highlight being his involvement at WrestleMania 23 with Donald Trump. Can't say that's not a big deal now, can you? When he left the WWE, however, he did find his way to TNA very quickly in April 2009, but it wasn't like Lashley was able to be a game changer. It was intriguing, but he still needed time to grow into the role. He's done that now and is genuinely awesome, but it was a case of too much too soon. It meant he was fighting an uphill battle for a long time. Number 8, Test. I'd totally forgotten this had happened, but after Test had been released from the WWE in early 2007 for a wellness policy violation, he sat out his no-compete clause and turned up in TNA shortly afterwards as Andrew Punisher Martin. Running in to save Abyss and Sting from an attack by Christian, AJ Styles and Tomko, he was thrown right into the main event. Unfortunately, it didn't go too well. He only wrestled one official match for the company at Hard Justice 2007. A ridiculous Doomsday Chamber of Blood encounter before just being forgotten about almost entirely. It's not like Test wasn't pushed in WWE, because he certainly was, but it never really clicked and then he was jumping around at the top of the TNA card. Unfortunately, this was his last real run, as he passed away in March 2009. Number 7, Elijah Burke. At one point, it actually appeared as if TNA was going to prove that WWE's decision to fire Elijah Burke was a huge mistake. Getting over very quickly in front of a new audience, he was a huge hit in the Impact Zone following his 2008 release. It was a rare moment where all the cards were headed in the opposite direction, but then disaster struck. Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff were brought in early 2010, the roster was reset, and talent like Elijah were left by the wayside. He was given a world title match against AJ Styles where the crowd was definitely ready to see a change, but instead Burke got stabbed in the face by a pen, and it was a downward spiral from there on out. Number 6, Rhino. As he's shown for most of his career, Rhino is great. He was great way back when, and he's been great since he swayed back into the WWE scene in 2015, 2016, and now 2017. The man beast is more than capable, which is why it was strange when he was released under Vince's watch in 2005. From here, he did go to TNA, and when there, it wasn't the best. Debuting as protection for Jeff Jarrett, Rhino whooped Raven, the then world champion, and it was all very by the numbers. Well, almost. But it was made worse because before his arrival, Jarrett was outwardly asking when a bunch of the WWE released guys were going to head their way, which made everyone sound stupid. Rhino was treated like a main eventer headlining the Sacrifice pay-per-view and had a decent run across the way, but he was always seen as a former WWE guy. No one needs that. Number 5, Billy Gunn. Not that surprisingly, when Billy Gunn was let go from the WWE in late 2004, TNA were desperate to get him. Gunn was a legit recognisable dude on their roster, so surely he would bring an appeal to Impact Wrestling, and it was a smart way to think. This all happened so fast, he did turn up at the company's first pay-per-view against all odds, and it was so quick he didn't even have a name. He was just called, formerly known as Billy Gunn in WWE. which is very catchy. Gunn would soon become the Outlaw and then eventually Kip James after WWE kept kicking off about it, but this name thing did get a bit ridiculous. Billy would wear t-shirts that said things like, "You already know my name," so they may as well have had the WWE logo just printed on them, it was so obvious. It wasn't overly smart. Number 4, K-Quik. One of TNA's original pet projects, K-Quik was amazingly the second ever TNA title holder after beating the NWO World Heavyweight Champion Ken Shamrock in 2002. It was so early on it didn't seem too crazy as everything was fair game at this time. But it wasn't until he was rebranded that things kinda came together. Ditching K-Quik and becoming Ron the Truth Killings, he managed to make his mark in TNA with a bunch of killer promos about discrimination in the industry. He was booked all over the place from here, jumping face to heel and heel to face a little too much, but it was probably these performances that did see Truth eventually make his way back to the WWE. In that sense, you could probably say this was a success. Number 3, Brian Christopher. Brian Christopher deserved his spot in TNA. What he probably didn't deserve in 2002 was to be treated like a top guy, especially because he was far from that in the WWE. Worse, the reason he had been booted out of there was because he tried to transport drugs across the Canadian border. So it's not like he was firing on all cylinders. It was damaged goods in many ways. Christopher did lose most of his matches even though they were at the top of the card, but TNA was so new that having a WWE mid-carder as your main eventer was just silly. No one bought it, and Jerry Lawler's son was eventually shown the door in 2004. Number 2, X-Pac. Another wrestler that most people forgot made appearances in TNA, X-Pac was quite the get for the promotion. A star in both WCW and WWE during the Monday Night Wars, he had value, so arriving in the Impact Zone in September 2002 did get a few eyes to peer across. The thing is though, there was a reason why he wasn't with the WWE anymore, and a lot of that were personal issues. These continued in TNA and it was just quite clear X-Pac didn't have the motivation he once did. He felt like a shadow of his former self, which hurt the reputation the company was trying to build up. He was a former WWE guy, however, so he won the X Division title pretty much as soon as he arrived, and he was kept special for as long as TNA could do so. Amazingly, his last piece of business came in 2010 when he no-showed Lockdown. Then he was let go. Number 1, Raven. When Raven surprised everyone and debuted for TNA in 2003, he did that thing all recent WWE guys did. He jumped the queue and went straight into a feud for the world title. Given that he had been on Vince's payroll just 2 days earlier though, there was every reason to consider this a success. His stock was pretty high. Free from the usual no-compete clause, Raven went full-on old school, re-embracing the character that had made him famous, and everyone treated him like a huge deal. Vince Russo even screamed on TV, "We've got f***ing Raven!" Things didn't go too badly either and actually helped numbers increase. But when the trigger was never properly pulled, Raven soon started to fall into just another WWE guy territory. It could and should have been so much more.